Hello everyone, my name is Lowko, and today it is time for a professional match of Terran versus Terran. Spawning here in the southeast corner of Cairo's Junction LE in game number 1 of this best of 3 series and playing with the red Terran SCVs. We are currently looking inside of the main base of uThermal. And his opponent in the opposite corner playing with the blue SCVs instead. He's from South Korea, a very, very strong opponent. We have none other than TY. So when you talk about who's the current strongest Terran player in the world, I think that names like TY and Maru will come up most often. And I have to be honest with you, TY has looked more impressive than Maru over the last couple of months especially. TY certainly shows no sign of slowing down, whereas in especially the offline tournaments outside of South Korea, Maru seems to be struggling quite a bit. uThermal though, easily considered to be one of the strongest outside of Korea as well, and obviously he is from the Netherlands, so I always love watching these games, just because I'm from the Netherlands myself as well. Now, this was a series that was played recently at IEM Katowice, and when I asked on Twitter which series I should go ahead and cast, this one was actually brought up a couple of times, so I figured it's probably going to be a really, really good one. Alright, so Terran versus Terran. Here's the thing about TVT. I love watching and casting games of Terran versus Terran. I absolutely suck terribly at playing this matchup, okay? So I do play my off races from time to time. I'm pretty decent at Terran versus Protoss, pretty decent at Terran versus Zerg. I absolutely suck at playing Terran versus Terran. This matchup, it is very, very different from the other ones in Starcraft 2, and I don't really know exactly why that is. I've thought about it quite a bit, and I think the main reason is that in most of the matchups, right, more stuff beats less stuff. So, for example, in Roach versus Roach battles in Zerg versus Zerg, if you have 20 Roaches and your opponent has 15, the person that has 20 is likely to win, right? But in Terran versus Terran, even when you have a smaller economy, and even though you might have less army supply, oftentimes you can still win the game and try and force a comeback. And that's the thing about TVT. Because of the defensive positions that siege tanks and liberators and drops and whatnot can provide, there is a lot of value in your units, even when you don't have the bigger army. So that's what I love about TVT. I really enjoy watching the creative control, just because these players, especially at this level, can get so much done off of a very, very small army. So generally speaking, the mid game in this matchup is dominated with siege tanks and marines. Late game, we will oftentimes see a switch towards a lot of liberators as well as Vikings. The thing about siege tanks, of course, is that they can shoot further away than they can actually see themselves. So you need to get that vision as well, and air units obviously are great for that, but scans can also provide that value. But in the early game, basically every unit is available. I mean, you see a lot of Cyclone play, there's especially a lot of Raven play right now. The interference matrix being an absolute nuisance. I don't know if we're going to be seeing that in this series as well, but interference matrix is an ability on the Raven that essentially shuts down a lot of the other units that can be used in this matchup as well, and it makes it very, very difficult to judge if a situation is safe or if you can go ahead and push. So I'm excited to see where this game is going to take us. 4 Reapers right here for TY. He's actually following it up with more Reapers. So this is what I mean, right? This is a very uncommon build for TVT, and it might very well blindside uThermal right now. He's gonna have to go up against a much bigger army. Those Hellions actually caught in a bit of a weird angle. Now, uThermal is very well known for his biological unit control especially, but I mean, sometimes this game is just a numbers game. That is way, way more than he can deal with right now. Siege tank though will spawn in just a little bit right here. There's also that medevac coming out. A couple of Marines apparently getting caught on the wrong side of that wall. The siege tank though is gonna be absolutely phenomenal, right? You can use it really nicely to control and fight these units. Obviously, you don't want to siege it up in this kind of scenario, right? And I think eventually uThermal should be able to throw this army back home. There's a Viking coming up as well once that one is out, since there's no anti-air available here for the time being for uThermal. Oof. You likely will see this Terran player in blue retreat, but not without dealing a lot of damage and taking firm control here of the early game. I love it. Alright, so all the units now, these Reapers, even though they can jump up and down cliffs, they are still safe right now inside of the medevac. They do actually heal, by the way, while they're inside of the medevac, because of the combat drugs, of course. But the Viking now is out, and while uThermal indeed did have to deal with quite a bit of aggression there in the early game, I think he is going to be fine. So here's a fun fact about the siege tank that I see a lot of, especially beginning Terran players, make the mistake with. Siege tanks, while sieged up, deal less single target damage than unsieged. So what that means is that if you have an unsieged tank, it's going to be better against a single Hellion or a single Marine. And obviously it's going to be a lot more microable as well. What I noticed a lot when I first started playing Terran is that I really only consider Terran units, or siege tanks rather, to be used while sieged up. I mean, it kind of has it in the name, but they are really, really strong as well when it comes to just simply having them unsieged and fighting units one-on-one. Now, I'm curious to see what TY's follow-up is going to be. uThermal is going to transition right now towards Ravens here, it looks like. So, indeed, we will likely see some interference matrix play here in just a little bit as well. Third CC now coming up for uThermal, whereas TY is looking to get a lot more aggressive. uThermal sending out an empty medevac, probably mostly for scouting purposes right now, to keep track of roughly where that army is located. There's the interference matrix, and actually now it can't use its boost ability, and that means that those two Vikings that TY came out with out of the fog of war, they certainly got the kill right there on the medevac. Wonderful work there by our blue Terran player. And actually, he's got to be very careful. TY trying to get in position. He does still have enough energy right here for another interference matrix. It is going to go down right there on the siege tank on the right. The one on the left, though, still firing. Even the Viking right now joining the fray. Just simply landing on the ground and trying to deal some additional damage as well. uThermal, though, this is a rough position for him to be in. Obviously, his reinforcements will spawn very, very closely to the battle, but the times of rushing out Stimpack and whatnot, they are gone. Both Vikings actually killing each other. The Ravens do still have a little bit of energy. One of them likely will end up going down there. One of the auto turrets, though, does get utilized, and it cleans up one more of the tanks. But this is what I mean, right? That range of siege tanks is really, really scary, although it is just barely out of reach there to really get any kind of damage. uThermal right now scanning to confirm whether or not that army is retreating. And, well, I guess likewise, we see TY now scanning the main base of uThermal to confirm, indeed, the additional third command center. TY, though, feeling brave enough while he was out on the map to go ahead and put up a third CC at the third base location. Obviously, that can be a little bit of a risk. uThermal opting to go for the safer option. He's now transitioning towards double upgrades here as well, and we finally see now both players transitioning towards Stimpack. So we will be seeing that very standard, I think, mid-game right here as a follow-up. But you can see in the early game, right, dynamics are already absolutely ridiculous. These units interact with each other all very, very differently. And I love this, actually, TY trying to use those Vikings to force that Terran army in the red colors a little bit further away. And that means the siege tanks right here can get in position. And while eventually I think uThermal once again should be okay, he's losing quite a bit. The Vikings actually landing right now. They deal bonus damage to mechanical, which means that usually they're going to be able to shoot this kind of thing away. The one siege tank's extremely low. Oh man, TY also landing his Vikings. And he manages to get the kill on one of those, the Vikings of uThermal. That one will be repaired back up, though, even though it lost its buddy. It is going to be repaired back up, and both players are continuing onwards right now with the macro. So just look at this, right? How difficult is this to play? Seriously. How do you know how many units you need to balance? How many Vikings do you produce here? When do you start making medevacs? Medevacs provide a lot of value. I love this little move as well from TY. So Vikings on the ground actually deal bonus damage to mechanical. So they actually clean workers up really quite quickly, other than drones. They don't really deal a lot of damage to drones, but they are actually surprisingly scary. And I think eventually, while this Viking will go down, it still ended up getting, I think, 5 or 6 kills there in total. Alright. At this point, though, our red Terran player did set up a couple of sensor towers, and that's gonna shut down a lot of this aggression here from TY. I mean, obviously, you can continue pushing, but it mostly all comes down to positional play. And if you can see exactly where your opponent is coming from, it's much, much easier to defend as well. So that means right now that uThermal has got a little bit of breathing room to go ahead and continue onwards with the production. He did just scan the main base of his opponent as well to confirm what exactly is happening here. TY adding on some additional barracks too. Combat shield will finish up here in just about a minute or so from now, and both players are going to go for that heavy siege tank marine based army. With 2-2 already coming up actually for uThermal, he's certainly not in a bad spot, but he has to be very careful. Since it is mostly TY who has been very active out on the map, with a 4th command center already coming up, uThermal does have to be careful that he does not start falling behind right here in the economic game. Larry the Marine apparently brave enough to stim forward to try and see what's going on. You will have to pay for that misstep with his life, but it does allow this Terran army from uThermal right now to move forward just a little bit. I wonder if he maybe wants to grab this base here as a 4th. Usually you want to expand away from your opponents, right? But if you feel brave, if you get into a good position, this might actually be easier to defend than the one right over here. Anyways, here we go. Here's that air-to-air battle happening. Both players want to optimize the amount of air units they have, which is really critical, because the person that gets the significant upper hand can transition toward the Liberators. And Liberators are great at forcing the unsiege from the opponent. Still, though, you have to be careful here. Ooh, uThermal decided to unsiege for just a little bit. TY, though, getting no information about that. He does decide to actually unsiege right now himself as well, and to probably head back home. uThermal, though, he's got a full medevac of a lot of units here. That's actually way more units that can fit inside of that medevac. They wanted to see if they could go after the 4th base before it could turn into a planetary fortress, which is what is happening right now for TY. But both players certainly respecting each other. They are trying their very best to get into a nice, siegeable location. And this is so weird as well, right? When you think about it, if you siege in the middle of the map like this, it means that your 3rd base is going to be very, very vulnerable. So uThermal has to be very cautious here with where he is putting his army units. Likewise, though, we see TY trying to create like an entrenched position right here in the center of the map. This matchup really does feel like chess, though. You always want to get control of the middle part of the board in chess, and it's very, very similar to that. But TY unloading a lot of those Marines, stimming forward, going after the SCVs at the 3rd base, forcing the liftoff right here. That immediately does create the window as well for the army to move on the right-hand side of the map. And even though uThermal did have control of the center, he is starting to run into a little bit of trouble because TY is coming from every single side. Pushing inside of his own main base, or inside of the opponent's main base right now, is TY, and he's dealing an awful lot of damage. Apparently, this doesn't actually allow uThermal to defend anymore. He looked at the situation, he's like, okay, that's not gonna happen. Instead, I'm gonna go for the counterattack, and I think this might very well be a good call. There's not that many defensive units available right now for our Terran player in blue, and while indeed there's a lot of damage being done right here on the other side of the map as well, this is forcing the retreat right here from TY. Siege tank, though, inside of the main base, it just spawned, and I think it is likely going to be enough to deflect a lot of these units from stimming forward and running up into the main base. Still, though, those Vikings dealing a lot of damage as well. They are very close to those Marines, so they need to back off here for the time being as well. And even though this was a very close fight here, the supply count is actually looking relatively even, but where's the real advantage is the fact that TY has got a straight up stronger position than his opponent, plus an additional base that's a planetary fortress. There's no 4th command center here for uThermal. He's essentially forced right now to go in with the hot evac on the other side of the map. He needs to try and set up the surround right here, the sandwich on all of these units as well. He does manage to do exactly that. The siege tanks from TY do fall on the low ground, then uThermal does break free with a couple of those Marines, but still, the economy right now for TY is significantly better. It allows him to add on the 2nd factory, or the 3rd factory, rather. I was going to say, that would be very late for a 2nd factory. But no, he's going to add on an additional factory, adding on additional barracks here as well. And he's going to be in a really strong economic position. Even a 5th command center is now coming up. So TY, rather than like risking it all, he decided to just simply get another base out to try and win that way instead. Still, though, you have to be careful. Ooh, all of the siege tanks just barely picked up in time. They're going to be able to boost forward with that medevac. This does create a little bit of wiggle room, though, for our red Terran player to get into position right here with the siege tank. One scan should be able to confirm exactly where all of that army is located. At the same time, one Liberator dealing some damage on the other side of the map. Defensive Terran units for uThermal should be able to get rid of that, but I still really do like the position here for TY. He's got a bigger army, he's got a bigger economy, and while he's one upgrade ahead as well, or actually one upgrade behind here in total, he still does have an awful lot of units, right? His production is just simply so much bigger. uThermal trying to make something happen here. He did manage to clean up that single Liberator that was dealing some damage as well, but TY successfully deflected this really, really aggressive push from uThermal. And while uThermal has tried to pile on the pressure to snowball this game into his advantage, it hasn't really happened just yet. The main base right now floating over towards the fourth. uThermal running out of resources in the main base. So that is going to be the way he plans on continuously mining in this game as well. Base in the center right now, though, being acquired here by our South Korean Terran as well. He lifted up the main CC and it's now floating over towards that location. But now that the air dominance is in favor of TY, he's using this opportunity to now switch into a lot of Liberators, and that is very, very scary. uThermal, though, he decided that this is the time that he needs to go for a Doom drop. With most of these Terran players caught out in the middle of the map, obviously you can drop right on top of it. You could also head for the main base instead. Very difficult position to micro against. At the same time, TY unloading a lot of Marines outside of Medevacs as well. But here we go. Big drop inside of the main base on top of the production of TY. uThermal tries to shove forward, but already though, TY got into a wonderful position right there with those siege tanks. The Liberators also providing the value, and he's still pushing on the other side of the map. TY looking absolutely dominant from start to finish. He is the one who obtains the victory in this first match of the day. I really enjoyed that build though, not gonna lie. That was a really cool style from TY, especially the early game with the Reapers. Not something that we see all too often in Terran versus Terran, or maybe it's like a recent development that I haven't seen all too much just yet, but following the Hellions up with additional Reapers definitely is not something that we saw just a couple of months ago, or at the very least not very often. Obviously there's a lot of cheeses that players do like to go for, but we'll see what is gonna go down right here in this second game as well. TY, definitely a player who could go for cheese, but I think if any of these players are gonna cheese, it is likely gonna be uThermal. I remember watching uThermal Battlecruiser rushing years ago, okay? He used to do all kinds of cheeses, a lot of Reaper play as well. He's very, very good at controlling Reapers, especially in the early game. So we'll see if he decides to bust out some cheese in this series as well. It is a little risky though, because if you do it right now when TY is 1-0 ahead, you obviously put all of your eggs in one basket, and oftentimes in Terran versus Terran especially, if one of those builds gets scouted and you have some time to respond, you can just shut it down and make it look really, really stupid. I mean, if a proxy barracks gets scouted, that's basically game over right then and there, because it's super easy to counter if you know that it's coming. Anyways, TY is gonna send this SCV across the map, so he doesn't really want to take any risks. He already did decide to go for the double gas, so I don't think he's gonna go for a quick expansion here. He might very well decide to get a little bit more aggressive. Maybe this is meant to plant down a factory, but I don't think so. No, the factory is gonna go up inside of the main base here of our South Korean Terran. Both players, though, playing relatively safe here, right? It's kind of funny always to me how a lot of the games, especially in mirror matchups, can be casted just purely from the production tab. That's kind of where you can see some deviation. So uThermal going for the faster second supply depot. It's obviously a very minor difference. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you add it on right now or maybe a little bit later. There you go. If you have the resources for it, I guess there's an argument to be made that you should just go ahead and make it. I think that's mostly a stylistic choice, and uThermal wants to create this, once again, a really cute little ramp, or this area over here where Reapers are going to have a hard time getting into it. So oftentimes if you just simply attack move towards the main base, units will try and jump up on this ramp, and then if you up the depot, obviously, they get stuck in this little area, and it can really throw your opponent off quite a bit. Alright, so uThermal is currently sending a Reaper towards this area of the map. He did the same thing in game number 1, and you will be able to find out that indeed there's a starport being proxied here for TY. It is very important to scout that, obviously, because if a Liberator goes in or maybe a Banshee comes in before you expect it, it's going to arrive like 10-15 seconds earlier. It can actually deal a tremendous amount of damage in that time. So TY is going to be forced to now build it inside of his main base instead, putting him into a bit of an awkward position, and you can see immediately that supply count goes in favor of uThermal. Neither player really looking to take an expo just yet, although uThermal likely wants to grab one here at the 3-minute mark. So that's actually rather late, right? Very, very safe opener here. Both players opting to go for the 1-1-1 before they put down any kind of expansions. So 1 barracks, 1 factory, and then 1 starport here as well. All right. So let's see if he can capitalize on this scenario, right? He's got 1 more Reaper right here. There's obviously the Liberator that's going to come out a little bit earlier as well. A Viking as a follow-up here too for the Dutch Terran. We see TY doing the same thing, just in a more delayed fashion. He also decided to go for the factory here with a tech lab on it, so he's going to be able to start producing that single Cyclone. As long as he holds this top of the ramp, he's going to be in a fine position. That always does allow him, though, to get that first shot in. SCVs can be pulled off the mineral line as well, but excellent control there so far by uThermal, getting quite a bit of value. Still, though, repair coming up here as well for TY, trying to use some of those SCVs in his advantage as well. Liberator coming up, it's going to be able to start shutting down some of the mining inside of the main base of the Terran player in blue. Liberator now flying across the map as well for TY, who's already actually taken a lot of losses. That's 12 SCVs in just a couple of seconds. And this is kind of what I mean, right? Even the Viking already out here anticipating this move for TY. This is what I mean. If you get scouted in the early game, you just simply are in so much trouble if you decide to go for a proxy. uThermal finds the starport, and that's GG right there. He immediately capitalized on the scenario and obtained the victory. Game number 2. That's kind of what my ladder games look like, okay, with Terran. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. In game number 2, it's very easy to pinpoint what the mistake was, right? Both players going for very similar builds. TY's starport got scouted, which allows uThermal to capitalize on the scenario, as he just simply gained like 30 seconds on his opponent's starport units, right? It's a pretty easy thing to look at. However, in game number 1, a similar mistake would have actually ended the game right there and then as well. And both players microing such a big variety of units. Okay, hold that thought. I think uThermal, he wants to apparently obtain the victory in this best of 3 by going for a proxy barracks play. Look, basically what I'm trying to say is that you need to micro really, really well in the early game to obtain the victory in TVT, or to try and at the very least get an advantage. It's super difficult. It's super tricky. And oftentimes at this level, both players are so good at controlling their units that it will just simply end up looking even. But it's really easy to make a small mistake and just simply lose right then and there. Okay, TY is sending an SCV across the map once again. However, the barracks are going up unscouted. If this would be scouted right now, I'm sure TY would be, rushing out the factory. Luckily for him, he's not going for anything super, super aggressive. So no quick expansions or whatever, judging by the fact that he already took the second gas. But as soon as this SCV gets across the map and it scouts, okay, there's no barracks here. I wonder if TY is already thinking about what could be happening. Factory coming up here, though, for TY. He's got a single Reaper now on the production tab as well, but uThermal already has 2 of those jetpack raiders coming up. The SCV's hiding for now. There you go. One of them apparently feeling brave enough to start heading back home. And, well, while TY doesn't really know exactly what's going on, he did look around the main base, and he knows that whatever it is, he needs to be in a very defensive posture. SCV now headed into the main here as well. I wonder if he's planning on maybe, like, putting down a bunker? I think that would be pretty good to have. Obviously, these are 50 gas and 50 minerals each. With this many SCVs, there should be more than enough mining here for uThermal to afford a bunker as well, but he is certainly planning on dealing game-ending damage right here, right now. Hellion is coming up. There we go. Bunker is coming up as well. TY is going to try and defend this with just going for a lot of those Hellions. Usually Hellions in big numbers with their splash damage especially, they can be microed so that they can do a lot of damage. Great control though so far by TY. Not really losing that much just yet. Only a couple of workers have gone down. Even one, of course, from, or actually one in favor right there of TY. TY getting the upper hand so far, even though he's the one who's under a lot of pressure. Now keep in mind, these Reapers do need to be out of contact, or out of combat rather, for a little while before they actually end up healing. It's really important that TY rallies these Reapers into the correct, or these Hellions rather, into the correct location. That's why uThermal is sharking around the factory. If it can snipe it right when it spawns, that would be a really big advantage. Once again, though, a Marine right there being traded for a Reaper. Second Reaper goes down as well. TY showing us some excellent control on the units that he's got. And now that these Reapers are forced out of the main base, I think he must be feeling pretty confident, right? He's got a solid economy. He knows he's gonna have a much stronger unit composition here as well the longer that this game goes on. But as long as uThermal saves the Reapers, there's always a chance. Reapers, especially with their grenades, are really, really scary. Now, TY apparently puts down an engineering bay inside of his opponent's main base, feeling a little bit cheeky. The starport was also proxied, and this is just a little bit of BM right here by our South Korean Terran, who gets the Liberator inside of the main base of the Terran in red, and that means that there is no more mining right now for uThermal. I love it. TY throwing a little bit of shade right there. He's like, look, just get out. Just get out of my game. I got this one. Still, though, he needs to be careful. You don't want to be too overconfident. Overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer, as Darkest Dungeon taught me very well. But regardless, right? I mean, one Widow Mine is not going to be enough. Regardless, with this much lost mining time, I don't really see exactly what you want to do here if you are uThermal. All TY needs to do is hold the main base. He even's got a second Liberator now joining the fray as well. He just wants to continuously deny that mining as much as possible, and with a second one coming up, I think uThermal is making a last-ditch effort to try and get the damage in. Good Hellion control here once again by TY, and he is indeed the one who obtains the victory here in this best-of-3 series. I wonder what this game would have looked like if TY decided to go for a bit of a different opener here in the third game. But this time around, he already was in a very, very solid position. And he ended up getting the victory there when his opponent was cheesing. A fun series of Terran versus Terran. I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, you know what to do. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as I upload more. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day, okay? Do not forget to smile. And I'll see you once again in the next one.